amazing day. It's been long, but incredibly fruitful and generative, and lots of challenges, but also lots and lots of opportunities that I think will be really helpful to people here at WashU, but also thinking more broadly about what does it mean to be innovative and transformative in the humanities, and what does it mean to kind of break out of some of the strictures that we've set for ourselves. So I don't really have much of a sort of fixed agenda for this conversation. I wanted to ask Joy and Paula to talk a little bit about the things that they've been doing both at ACLS and MLA, because this isn't the first time these ideas have popped into your head. So I think it would be really helpful for people to know the work that's being done. And then we'll maybe talk about some of the work you think you would like to do, and then maybe some takeaways from the day, and then some conversation. Sound good?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go first. Go ahead. You go.
Okay. So at ACLS, we are thinking about, as we've talked about through the day, we've been thinking about expanding what counts. We often just use that phrase, expanding what counts.
What counts? Yeah.
In like very much as a complex multi-generational systems problem. So the interventions range from the new Dissertation Innovation Fellowship, which took the place of the Dissertation Completion Fellowship, which Mellon had funded for many years. We had one of those nervous conversations where the program officers call you and say, "We've been doing this program for a very long time." And you think, but the Mellon entire learning team are great, and they sent us the signal early so that we could think about what we might do differently. And I'm just dwelling on that because that fellowship supports graduate students. You can only imagine how devilish this was to figure out for the U.S. programs team. But it intervenes in the midpoint of a doctoral student's career, and defining that was the tough thing. When they have identified the area where they want to do their dissertation research, but they haven't they haven't written half of it yet. Maybe they're just writing the proposal, and it gives them an extra year. The university has to sign on to promise that they won't pull a year of funding. This is an extra year. This is not replacing. To give the student a chance to immerse themselves in an internship outside the academy, in another field, learn another skill, gain some critical distance on their field if they want to do a critical approach. But the whole the kind of reasoning behind this was not only to help support 60, 70 odd students each year, but to get a conversation started in those departments and in their fields and across the nation and around the world ideally, and I'm not kidding, I'm really sparking a conversation through these ripples of activity that would acknowledge that if we're going to encourage this kind of work, field expanding and innovative work, or not innovative, I mean traditional, but such is the state of education that people have to go back and learn traditional skills, so it might be very traditional. I mentioned papyrology earlier today. Then we have to think about it from the not even from the very beginning, but from one beginning point, which is doctoral education. So doctoral education reform and kind of incentivization of the acceptance rather of an expansion of what counts as legitimate work, all the way to we mentioned the Emerging Voices Fellowship, and then the central fellowship, our central ACLS fellowship also is in the conversations with reviewers seeking to say, we want to reward forward-thinking work and foundational skills work and really the whole gamut, to push back on the tendency of the review committee sometimes to become very attentive to trends and and a little narrow-minded their thinking. So that's one piece, and then more briefly I'll just say you've already heard a little bit about what we call internally our change acceleration work, which we don't use that term publicly often because again, change makes people, it sets their hair on fire and makes them run away sometimes. So, but it really is accelerating in partnership with others, in collaboration with others, and lifting up other people's work, whether it's in institutions or in other organizations like the MLA and other societies, AAC&U, other organizations, to draw attention to the many ways in which this system is broken, but where there are many, many ideas about how to fix it and many local solutions that just need to be interconnected. So I'll just say by closing, we're working with Mellon right now on the funding of what we hope will be the continuation of a leadership program that's designed to bring together administrators and also members of third spaces, people who are not administrators, in pairs, to come together in a series of workshops to learn the skills of coalition building, PR. And Antoinette, you asked such a good question about like making the work visible, and conflict resolution and all the rest in order to change from within. So that's some of the ways in which we've tried to we are continuing to try to intervene, supporting scholarship and supporting infrastructural and professional cultural change.
Very good.
We're a member society of ACLS, so we're a disciplinary association, and it's a big discipline, obviously. Languages, literatures, we have area studies folks, we have folklorists, linguists, so it's a big discipline, but it is a disciplinary society. We have, for a number of years, been trying to intervene, as some of you may know, in graduate education with the Connected Academics Mellon-funded project to try to shift graduate education. It is really hard to shift graduate education as a concept. The individual graduate students who went through our pro seminars had great results, learned a ton, got great careers, some inside higher ed, some outside higher ed. But the departments that sent them seemed determined not to learn from that. So we have traditionally been an association of, associated with prestige and scholarship. The convention is prestigious to get accepted, PMLA, lowest acceptance rate in language and literature, blah, blah, blah. You know, we produce the MLA International Bibliography, the scholarly database for research in our field. So we're associated with scholarship, and our convention has been associated first with scholarship and second with the hiring season, which traumatizes people and sometimes they never come back. We have divorced ourselves from the hiring process before Zoom, I will say. Yeah. We did this before. We said this is too expensive. You can't make graduate students pay to get interviewed. It's not fair. And we stopped doing that about 7 years ago. We have replaced that with professional development, understanding our role as a national role. So complementing the research with individual faculty member professional development. You know, here's how you turn a conference paper into an article. Here's how you write a book proposal. Dealing with, you know, an acquisitions editor or looking for a job outside the academy, or all kinds of professional development offerings. But we've also turn our professional development attention to something that hasn't come up a lot today, which is kind of your role in your department and your responsibilities to the future of your field in a very concrete way, and that is in terms of if we don't have undergraduates, we will not have faculty members. And you suffer from this less at an institution like this than a lot of institutions that are involved. The MLA, it's true. But especially for an organization that represents language departments, if we don't provide resources to language departments to help you recruit undergraduate students, your departments will go the way of West Virginia. And we feel that very deeply at the MLA, that responsibility for that kind of advocacy work and professional development training. So our current Mellon funded project is a project that focuses on recruitment, retention, and career readiness for undergraduates in our fields, especially focusing on students of color, first-generation college students, and Pell Grant recipients. Because if student populations who have their parents telling them they need to major in something that's going to give them an engineer's salary when they graduate, if we can't convince those students and their parents that it's okay to major in our fields, that we will just become a province of elite.
Right.
So this is some of the directions, I would say, that are running parallel with the discussions that we're having today.
They're all
And I'd love to
intertwined.
connect them a little bit.
Yeah, they are all very intertwined. So what are some of the things that you would like to do that you just haven't had time or resources? I'm not thinking about the things that you have done, the loose design and workshop and all the things that are built around that, the guidelines that MLA has put out on public scholarship, thinking about translation, which I know the MLA has been talking about for decades. You know, what are some of the things left to do? This obviously conversation is ongoing, this problem is ongoing, or is it an opportunity, or rather than a challenge? But what are some of the things you can do at your organizations, or that you think that faculty can do? And then I'll open it up for more general conversation.
Well, you mentioned the loose design workshop, and I have just been saying to Kit, who was involved in that, that one of the things we didn't have time or people power to carry through on is a thing that we need to do for all our initiatives in this regard, and that is tell the story, get the story out there, and connect it up with and get it in front of the people. You know, the deans, the provosts, the presidents, the boards of trustees, the public eye, to what degree we can. And I don't want to skip over, and it came up in the last session, it's one of the reasons I mentioned them because they're on my mind, people in professional schools, and in sectors, academy adjacent, who have given up on, even though they're very interested in history and culture, if they're working in, say, in public health, they were talking about, they're working in public health, they want to know how community, they lack cultural competency, they know they do, but they're not having the easiest time connecting with people in humanities departments who seem very remote from their interests. So sparking those kinds of conversations, but making them visible, because only that will lead to what I really think we're ripe for and we need in the post-COVID era, or whatever phase we're in, peri-COVID era, is we are really ready for a revolution here. I think in redefining humanistic knowledge and where it sits in the university, in the distribution of knowledge in the humanities, social sciences, I think we're so past it. We are so past it. It's not serving us well. Humanists need to be everywhere in the university. And we have to figure out, I'm not saying it's simple, the future of disciplines and how they're going to express themselves, but the current box is I think also part of the problem. So I'm actually complicating it even more. I'll just say one more thing about, along with the PR, and I think if any Mellon people are watching this, they'll be very happy to hear me saying this. We've heard Mellon mentioned so many times today, and we've got to find more funders for this work. And that's where I think the professional school and extra sector, looking out to these extra sectors will help us, because there's more money there. It's not a single organization reliant, and I don't want to, lose in Getty and Carnegie, and there are other foundations who of course have been also active. Loose funded the design workshop. I don't want to forget them. I want to be grateful to them. But in terms of big players who are seeking new priorities and wondering what the hell is going on with higher education, is it just the total mess that it looks like it is on the front page of the New York Times, to get in there and say, no, actually that's not the story, don't read the New York Times on education. Listen to Paula's op-eds, read her writing on CNN, like that's where the action is. Extra sector PR.
Extra sector PR and pushing out our information in the best way to have them receive it.
And then getting money.
And then getting them to give us money.
I think we haven't had to make a case for ourselves in the way we have to now before. And I think we suffer from the disadvantage that people understand applied science, and they have a vague understanding that you need basic science to get to applied science, but I think people don't have the same understanding about the humanities. For example, they talk about community engaged scholarship. There's a woman at Montclair State who writes on, she was all, when Bridgerton came out, and then Queen Charlotte, Sanditon, She was all over the press. She was interviewed everywhere. She was in LARB and Lapham's and Times Literary Supplement and Slate, and talking about the racial politics of those shows and what we can learn about our own race, understanding of race in our culture, but about the way we want to spin history or not in relation to race. So, I mean, she very subtle work. Her name is Tricia Matthew. She's a wonderful race and the Regency scholar. And what people forget when they see good public scholarship in the humanities is there are years of expertise behind that work. People never think that a scientist who writes for the general public just does it off the top of his head. They know the scientist has years of expertise behind them, but we somehow don't have the same kind of conviction about the necessity for humanities expertise for understanding the world around us. That's a job I'm trying to get the MLA to do a little better as a national
I think we all
body.
need to learn how to do that, and the MLA will show us the way, I'm sure. So before I open it up, one or two takeaways from the conversation today. There's been a lot of generative content. I've got I could probably pick my 5 top things that I want to think about. But with all the experience that you both have in thinking through these things, what might be something that's stuck in your mind?
I was hugely inspired by the assistant professors and postdoc we heard speak. I mean, that was that. I think I said to somebody afterwards, if we needed a reason to get up in the morning, like if I'm having trouble getting up out of bed in the next, few, I'm just going to think of that to help me out of bed.
That's why I want to do this, because of that kind of work.
Yeah.
That is the best and most exciting work and the best of what we can offer as humanities disciplines. So making sure that we've got all the structures in place and the infrastructure.
But that's the key is clearly the impulses and the good feeling is in place, and it's getting the structures in place to encode all of that all the way across, because some people it was the first time they talked to each other about this stuff. Other people hadn't talked about it before at all. So I mean, you have all those ducks, but they're not in a row.
No.
And I think it was really inspiring. Every aspect of what we heard. From the questions from the audience to the panels in the front, and what just remains to be seen is I come back to Antoinette's over and over infrastructure. You just need to structure the supports for this, and it needs to be across and not individual to each tenure case or department.
Exactly, and that's departmental cultures can be challenging, and this is not a unique to WashU problem. And so how do we navigate through those things and learn to, create these documents that give us the support for that kind of work that was really mind-blowing. I mean, it was amazing.
Can I say one other
Please.
little thing? One of the things we struggle with a bit at ACLS in terms of getting our various constituencies excited about this work is that the outcomes can seem very boring, very small. Changes in the language of the faculty handbook, and I've had this conversation with a number of people, and they say, love the vision of new humanities revolution, and so what's going to come out of this? And I'm like, wow, people are rewriting faculty. They're like, yay! We need a way to
But we do, but those are the things, those are the boring policy documents that underpin the exciting work.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Accreditation.
Yeah, that's not sexy.
No. But and tying that to, as I think Kia and others brought up but maybe not as much as we should have today. I mean, how key this is to an equitable and inclusive academy and welcoming people who have not only been excluded but damagingly so.
And that was for me when I knew that this was I found the person I needed to talk to was when Heather and I had our first conversation about this event, and she said to me, "But this is of course about equity and access," and I was like, "Well, yes, that's exactly what it is," and so we are on the same page, and we can. So I think that's at the heart of so many of the things that we're talking about. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I would love to invite comments from all of you, those of you who presented earlier, those of you who didn't present earlier. If I could just keep asking Paula and join things, but I'd like to give other people a chance to jump in. Kia.
I'll channel Mary, since she's not here, but she often says that the system was designed to get exactly the result that we're seeing, right? This is not a surprise. We've been talking about these things for 20 plus years. If I were to be a little cynical, it just feels like this is the ivory tower.
Yeah.
And this room is very ivory tower.
It is.
It's very
it
Rapunzel,
is.
right?
It is.
But it's like, so what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, and Adia touched on the crisis of confidence in higher ed, right? That people on the right are stoking, right, to defund higher ed too. And so I guess I'm thinking about how do we really make the change that needs to happen, because there's a reason why it hasn't happened so far, right? So what arguments do we now make?
Yeah, because we've said a lot today. Well, this we've been talking about for 20 years.
Yes.
This was
right.
So
So
how years ago, you didn't hire that panel of,
That's
those
true.
folks are new hires.
they are all new
And-
hires within the last 3 years.
I mean, that's, this place, I mean, and granted, tail, dog, you know, horse, cart, but but it's a start, and now you need to make it so they can stay and be productive and live their best lives here, and you can benefit from that.
I just want to give a shout out to ACLS, MLA, AJ, PA, because that work has really been a catalyst and a networking. I was on a panel that Joy convened in April, and we talked about networks of networks, because it's not just what happens. I mean, yes, it is explicitly what happens on a campus, but it's been said over and over again. We're not going to do it unless the people we respect are doing it. And I think that these associations are places where people can get assurance that other people are doing it, and get communities inside and outside of communities. And so I just want to give them big shout outs, because I've enjoyed working with them on various projects along the way.
MLA has been my lodestar since I was in graduate school. It has guided me. I've been on many of its committees. I have found it to be such a support and such a community. And community is one of the most important things, is we're like trying to gather here. So if you're not a member of the MLA, then you really need to be.
Save 20 on your, when you sign up. All capital letters, SAVE 20.
Thank you. Antoinette.
Yeah, so I wanted to share a lesson from Humanities Without Walls, which, you know, is this Mellon Foundation grant that you've heard of, and, you know, has moved a lot of money around and done a lot of really important, I think, work along the lines of what you're saying. And one of the things that we've done in the latest iterations of the grant is to measure in the application pool for the final 2 rounds, is to measure the rhetoric about reciprocity and redistribution against the way the grant application was budgeted.
Yeah.
And I think that I know less about the MLA's budget model, but if you look at the ACLS and where they have moved their money, they have moved it out of what I might call the single shingle visionary bucket into other buckets. And if you follow that money trail, you see where the transformation is happening. And so, since my former colleague Feng Shun is here, I would just say, look, where is the money being spent? How does it match the amazing transformative rhetoric that is being materialized here in the bodies of faculty and graduate students and potentially infrastructures, but follow the money and make sure that you hold that rhetoric, that discursive level accountable to the bottom budget line, especially, you know, in a moment globally when the humanities are being utterly evacuated, not just of money, of course, but they're being erased. And so I really think we call it forensic budgeting at HWW, and I think it's a really interesting principle to keep in mind.
You know what's really interesting in relation to that is, when I started at the MLA, my first year, the first Mellon grant I got was for a program to train graduate students alongside community college faculty members for careers at teaching intensive institutions. And I took a deep breath before, at my first convention, I announced that grant because I was worried that who the MLA was that old idea of who the MLA was. And I didn't even get through the full sentence of announcing that grant in the huge hall at the convention, and people erupted in applause. They were so excited about that work. And I think that we underestimate our colleagues sometimes when we think, oh, there's this prestige economy and that's all people care about. I found that really revelatory, and ever since then I've just operated on the idea that we will do more of that kind of work and the people will come along.
It's easier when it's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah. It's easier when it's not your money too.
Well, Mellon is apparently just the only funder in town, as we've heard today. We have about 5 more minutes. Well, I have one last question, and we've talked a lot about the impact of this, and one of the things I've always found challenging, and I had a conversation with Mary McKay about this, and it came up a lot at the conference in Indianapolis, National Humanities Conference, that we're not necessarily really good at measuring our own impact. So how do we learn to do that better? How do we train our early career colleagues? How do we train our graduate students? How do we train ourselves to communicate our impact, the impact that we obviously have, that we all believe that we have, but how do we train ourselves to do that better?
I think work like the Humetrics initiative.
And they're coming next semester.
Are they?
I love this law.
Just defer the answer to that.
Yeah. He's
But,
wonderful.
Identifying the values and then tracing what are the metrics that attach to those values, but that you set it up according to the impact you want to have, according to the values that you have, and don't impose other kinds of metrics.
Yeah.
I agree. I also think Humanities is a great model, and would love to hear or watch that on Zoom. I feel a little like a slightly perverse desire to push back though against that and say we also need to be in the business of reminding people of not just waving the word immeasurable around and leaning on it so hard, but I had a really interesting conversation a long time ago, over 10 years ago, with an NYU trustee who was not happy that I'd cornered him at at the end of the lunch. He was probably certainly trying to escape me, and because I was representing a sector of the university that he didn't care about pretty clearly. And I have to say, because you'll find it funny, but it's in these psychosocial dynamics are so important. He was like trying to get his wife to come over to talk to him.
What about that?
And she was lovely. But I said to him, what he had. Anyway, I'll just say, I said to him, what do you remember most about your college experience? And at first he said something like how grateful, like a platitude, and I asked him again. I was like, no, really, what memories come to mind? And one of the things he mentioned, kind of under duress, but he said he remembered going to a play, the first play he'd ever gone to. And I was like, that's hard to measure, isn't it? Like that. I didn't say it quite like that, but so that's the kind of experience I think we need to have more of reminding people in power, in positions of influence, that the kinds of experiences we're not only cultivating in the university, but we're hoping, we're creating fields for people to sustain that space in themselves in a world that beats it out of us, right? And is really relentlessly difficult to live in right now. So there's that as well, and I know that's a tough one because it can sound like evading, and it can sound too fuzzy for the people who want hard numbers, but it does have to be. I think I'm not saying it's controversial.
No, you're not.
But we have to figure out a way to get those allies, in the sciences and in the professional schools and among the trustees and among the higher leadership to really buy that and not just say, moving moving on, so how can we count?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think it's something that we as in the humanities need to be constantly thinking of and thinking about rather and paying attention to and developing our own metrics. Things that make sense to us, but then perhaps can be legible to others if we pull on the kind of experiences that Joy just referenced. Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists that were here today, both from our outside guests, those of you who spoke today from WashU. I'd like to particularly thank Joy and Paula for being here today and for the transformative and innovative work that ACLS and MLA are doing and the inspiration that you're giving to all of us as we go about our daily work, you know, supporting and advocating for the humanities. So thanks, everybody. Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, to say a few words as we close.
Okay, good afternoon. I know that I'm just standing between you and your very well-deserved break before dinner. I heard that Stephanie actually canceled the reception because
I did. I think
people want a break.
we need to give our panelists a break. They work very hard.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I am completely empathetic, so I will keep my remarks brief. How about that? So I have to say that I actually had my calendar blocked for the presentations of our assistant professors, except my off-campus meeting just went on and on. So I was not very happy about it. And now, since Joy said they're so inspirational, I now am kind of mad about it.
There's a recording here that we will
Oh,
send to you.
very good.
They were
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. But back to the script. I would like to express my gratitude to all of you for being here today to discuss how higher education institutions can encourage and foster innovation and inclusion in humanities scholarship. I would also like to thank our Center for the Humanities and the program in public scholarship for organizing this event, and it's great, just great to see so many people here gathering here with a lot of expertise and leadership to think about what the future is going to be like. Now, in arts and sciences at WashU, we are eager to establish new research pathways in the humanities, recruit the most innovative scholars, we saw some of them today, and leverage ways to share our work not just with the academy, but with the public at large. We live in a rapidly changing world with new exciting modes of outreach and dissemination. Higher education needs to embrace these novel avenues for research and practice. And today's event represents an exciting opportunity for WashU to lead in this area. And I'm eager to hear more about the insights and ideas that came out of today's sessions. I'm sure Stephanie is going to give me a report about that. I am appreciative of the Center for the Humanities for the foundation it has laid. Under Stephanie's leadership, the Center continues impressive efforts to elevate the importance and relevance of the humanities by instituting new research prospects, transformative pedagogy and opportunities for interdisciplinary dynamic engagement in our community and around the world. And I'm also heartened by the recent work of our new program in public scholarship led by Chris Schaberg. Well, and this is all about 8 signature initiatives under the Arts and Sciences Strategic Plan. The initiative is dedicated to translating our work and its importance to a broader audience. It aims to develop new platforms to share our scholarship, engage our faculty and graduate students in these opportunities, and increase our impact in the public and private sectors. Now, I know that in tandem with this progress is the need to examine how administrative policies and procedures surrounding tenure and promotion can successfully encourage innovation, inclusion, and broad impact. And I can assure you that you have a very eager partner in the Dean's office here. It's obvious that it's just a multifaceted endeavor that we're dealing with, one that will no doubt benefit from the thought leadership of those in the room today. And I look forward to learning more about today's findings from Stephanie and Chris. And I'm also looking forward to discussing these findings with school and departmental leadership. Once again, thank you for your insights today and your commitment to this transformative work. Enjoy the beautiful day and take a walk in our gorgeous neighborhood.